Hey guys, welcome to the Hoan Zone, where we help you multiply the assets you own. In today's video, we are going to be analyzing a deal. If you haven't already done so, definitely subscribe because you never know which one of these videos is going to take your career to that next level. In the last 10 years, I've bought millions of dollars worth of rental real estate. And in order to be in business for that long, I really needed to get good at analyzing properties. I'm going to be showing you what I typically do to analyze my properties for buy and hold. The three main things that I look for with a buy and hold are: one, you got cash flow; two, you got your cash out; and three, you got your debt service coverage ratio, also known as DSCR. If you've ever been a part of any of my trainings, you know I like to start with the end first. When it comes to a building, I look at what the ARV is. In this case, let's say the ARV, which stands for after repair value, is $200,000. I'll start there because what I want to do is I want to figure out what I'm going to be refinancing for. When I go to the bank will typically give me a loan to value of 75%. 75% of the $200,000 means I am going to be getting a loan for $150,000. Based on the loan for $150,000, the monthly payment is going to be about $800 per month. That is going to be our starting point for figuring out what the cash flow is going to be. The next step when we're trying to figure out the cash flow is what are we going to be bringing in? What are the gross rents for the property? In this case, the rent is going to be $1,500 a month. And then when you have a rental property, you will have expenses. And in this case, let's say the expenses are $300 a month. Now, this is going to be property by property. It's going to be different. This is just an estimate, $300 a month. Now, when we take the rent minus the $300 a month, we have $1,200 per month in NOI. The next step after you figure out your NOI, which stands for net operating income, is to subtract the mortgage. And we remember the payment is $800 a month. When I subtract the two, I am left with $400 a month cash flow. Now the question is this good or bad? That really depends on you. This is a personal rule. You have to figure out what your personal rule is. $400 a month, is that worth your time and effort to buy this property? And let's not forget, you have principal pay down. You also have appreciation and the tax benefits of depreciation. I go over that in another video. But this here is $400 per month. That might be good, that might be bad, but that's up to you to decide. Create a personal rule for yourself, and then you will see whether or not this passes your own cash flow rule. The next step in my analysis is to figure out the cash out of this property. Remember, we got a loan for $150,000. That was 75% of the $200,000 ARV. In this case, our purchase price was $60,000. That's what we bought the property for. Then we rehabbed it for $50,000. We have finance costs of $20,000. We also have holding costs of $5,000. Then we have closing costs of $10,000. When I add all of that up, I come out with $145,000. What that means is when I get that loan for $150,000 and I pay back everybody who lent me money, including myself, to buy and rehab this property, all of these costs here, this means I get to walk away with $5,000. That's what I mean by cash out. My all-in right here at $145,000 is $5,000 less than what the bank gave me when I refinanced the property. All right, so I did want to go over a rule or a detail about the cash out rule. Now, in the slide, I said that the loan was going to be $150,000 from the bank, and we were all in for $145,000. That's where I would cash out $5,000 because I was $5,000 under the loan amount. But what if I was all in not for $145,000, but instead I was all in for, say, $160,000, which is $10,000 more, right? It's $10,000 more than the loan amount. That means I have $10,000 of my own money stuck in the deal. Is that a bad deal? Well, let's take a look at it from another way. We remember the cash flow is $400 a month times 12, which is $4,800 per year. That's what I'm making per year from cash flow. What I want to do is calculate what they call your cash on cash return. So the cash I have in the deal is $10,000, and then the return is $4,800. So here I'm going to put $10,000, right? And so the cash on cash return, right? Cash on cash return. Here it's $4,800 a year, and then I have $10,000 invested because I didn't cash out. I did not cash out. I have $10,000 stuck. In this case, $4,800 a year divided by $10,000 is a 48% cash on cash return. Is 48% a good return for you per year? For most people, that's a yes. You have to decide, but I think it's pretty good. The next part is the debt service coverage ratio. I've brought a couple of the numbers back from the first slide, but I want to break down the words before we get started in this process. The first word is ratio. Typically, a ratio is anything where it's a number divided by a number. That's what ratios typically look like. And then the other word is DS, which stands for debt service. Okay, the debt service is just a fancy way to say your monthly mortgage payment. In this case, we have $800 a month is the debt service. And then finally, we have coverage. What they want to know is there is going to be a debt service, and then this line is the coverage. And since it's a ratio, we're going to need a number up here. And that number that we're going to use up there is called the NOI, which we had from before, which is the $1,200. Now, if you take the NOI, $1,200, and you divide it by the debt service, the $800, we are going to get a number of 1.5. What banks typically want is 1.25 or greater. In this case, our deal yields a debt service coverage ratio of 1.5, which in the bank's eyes is a great thing. And that's why we need to include it within our own analysis to make sure that this deal allows us to get the funding that we need. As a recap of the analysis, we have our cash flow, we have our cash out, and we have our debt service coverage ratio. You want to figure that out in that order. And if you get really good at this, you can do this in a couple of seconds with deals. All you got to do is take the ARV, times it by 0.75, and then you subtract out your all-in number, and which is just addition. What are your holding costs? What are your finance costs? What are your closing costs? What's your purchase price? What's your rehab? Add that all up. That's your all-in. You take your loan amount. That's a 75% loan to value of the ARV. You subtract it. You see if you have cash out. The cash flow, you just take the rent minus the expensive minus the monthly mortgage payment, and that's your cash out, right? You can do all of this in seconds. And then the debt service coverage ratio, really simple. If you already have the mortgage payment and you already have your NOI calculation from the cash flow calculation, you just divide the two and you're done. And that's how you get all three of these things. This is how I analyze my deals. The next thing, though, that I want to go over with you guys is red flags. There are a lot of things that you got to watch out for in real estate. And here are some of the things that you got to watch out for when analyzing deals. It is just about the numbers, but you also got to watch out for these things, and some of these are emotional. Red flag number one is the rule of thumb. People will give you a rule of thumb like, oh, the rehab is going to cost you $60 per square foot, $70 per square foot, $80 per square foot, whatever it is, right? People are going to have these rules of thumb. The problem with the rule of thumb is unless you can find a contractor that will actually do the work at that price, then you can't necessarily use that rule of thumb if you can't get somebody to actually do it for that price. You have to be mindful of those rules of thumb. Some people will say you never do a deal that doesn't cash flow more than $400 a month. Well, if all of your deals only yield $300 a month because that's just the area that you live in, their rule of $400 a month may not work for you. You may not buy any properties. And properties that cash flow at $300 a month may still be really great deals. be mindful of those kind of rules of thumb. Figure out what your area has and figure out the rule of thumbs that work for you in that particular area. The other red flag that you have to watch out for is being overly optimistic. People want to make deals work. They might set goals like, I want to do 100 deals by the end of the year. And let's say that they had done 60 deals already and we're in the 10th month, we're in October. Well, they're going to really push to close on the remaining properties, and it might not be that good of a deal, but because they have that drive to get to their goal, they may buy properties that aren't as good, but they're going to be overly optimistic about the numbers. The contractor may say that the price is $50,000, and then they think to themselves, well, I don't care what the contractor says, I believe I can do it for $30,000. Like, where did they make up that number from? But investors they're notorious for doing that. They just want that deal to work so badly that they will make up numbers that don't actually work for the deal. They also will guess really high in terms of the rent. Like I said, we want to make sure the cash flow works. We want to make sure that we can meet the debt service coverage ratio that the bank is requiring. And in order to do that, they might say that instead of the rent being $1,500 a month, they think they're going to get a client at $1,700 a month. Even though there's no data to show them that they can get that $1,700, they just in their heart think that that's going to be the case. And they run with the whole project. And it isn't until they're all done, completed the rehab, completed everything, when they actually market the property and they get no bites at the $1,700 that it needs to be in order to meet their cash flow and in order to meet the debt service coverage ratio. Also, they might say that the property is worth more than it really is. They might say that the ARV is $250 instead of $200 so that they can cash out. And then when the appraiser comes, the appraiser says the property's only $200, not $250. And they're all in for $210, they're upside down. They actually spent more than retail. And you got to watch that too. That over optimism will cause you to buy a bad deal. The final one is love. A lot of people fall in love with properties. They look at the property, they say, oh, it's so cute, it's so charming, it's so wonderful, it's historic, it's got all of this character. But they never say anything about the numbers. They just fall in love with the property and they want to buy the property just for that. That's a bad thing to do. That's a red flag. Do not fall in love with the property because you're not going to live in it anyway. You're buying it as a business. You're buying it for the cash flow. You're buying it for the passive income. If you buy a bad deal and it doesn't produce any passive income, instead of it being an asset, it is now a liability. Don't do that. Here at the Hoan Zone, we multiply the assets you own, not the liabilities. The liabilities come after you have a bunch of assets producing passive income so that you can pay for the liabilities. That's the trick. Don't fall in love with the properties. If you made it this far, congratulations. You now know how to analyze properties. You will need some help. You will need a contractor to tell you what the rehab cost is going to be. You're going to need a lender to tell you what your financing costs are going to be. You're going to need an agent to tell you what your ARVs are going to be and what your potential rents are going to be. You're going to need all of these people to help you with the numbers, with coming up with the numbers, but at least you have the framework in order to learn how to analyze. Let me know, has anybody ever broken down analysis like that for you? Have you ever seen anybody show you step by step how to analyze a deal in that fashion? I have yet to come across anybody showing people how to analyze a deal that way. So I'm curious, have you ever come across anything like that? Let me know in the comments below. If you are looking for additional help with analysis, with understanding how a deal is structured, definitely check out hoanzone.com. I'm going to have a ton of trainings on there to help you multiply the assets you own, of course. And if you enjoyed this video, if you got any value from it, definitely hit that like button and hit that share button so your friends can learn what you just learned. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video. See ya.